Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to Loving Out Loud, the video class. You're up to chapter 7, The Cart Kid. It's more fun to forgive. Glad you're here. I'm going to start off this week with a joke. This joke I first got out of a bubble gum packet, probably when I was maybe 12 or 13 years old. I still remember getting it. I still remember the joke. Funny thing is I can normally not really remember jokes very well, but for some reason I remember this one. And hey, excuse me for my glasses. If I bend my head and I get a little glare, I'm going to try not to do that. But wearing the glasses this particular episode. But I was at Wise Supermarket on East Memorial Drive in Muncie, Indiana, back in the 1970s. And I opened up this little packet of gum and I looked at that joke and it said, why do matches make such bad friends? The answer was, because they're such hotheads. Now, you may think, well, that's a corny joke, or that's a dad joke, or maybe some other something along that line. But for whatever reason, that joke stuck with me. And over the years, I've kind of remembered it and hung on to it when everything else has faded away. You know, you wonder why some things stick with you because, gosh, you know, I'm probably, who knows how many hundreds of thousands of things went through my brain back when I was a teenager, but for some reason that joke hung in there. So there you go. We'll start with that joke and you'll understand why in just a few minutes. And maybe it stuck with me because the reality is, if you don't control your anger, you probably won't have very many friends. That's, I don't know that that's a proverb, but maybe it ought to be if it's not. So, theme scriptures this week are 1 Corinthians 13:5, which says, love, it is not easily angered. And then Psalm 37, verse 8, refrain from anger and turn from your wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. And then James 1, 19 to 20, refrain. Oops, I almost read the same scripture again. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Again, James 1, 19 to 20. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about, well, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of road rage, and then maybe a couple of other examples. But we have a lot of things that really can make us angry as a people, right? I remember a time when I was, I guess must have been back in the late 80s, and I worked on, both my wife and I worked downtown Indianapolis. I worked in one place, she worked in another, but we had one car. So I would drop her off in the morning, and then I would pick her up after work in the evening. I left my place of work. I headed towards hers. I probably was about halfway there. I pulled up, stopped at a traffic light, and the guy behind me jumped out of his car, ran up to my car, and started yelling at me not to mess with him. Only he used a little bit more colorful word. Don't with me. And I mean, he was yelling it over again, and I looked up at him, and I'm like, okay. And he just glared at me and then went back to his car, and we both went on. I don't know why he was mad at me. I probably inadvertently cut him off. Didn't mean to, didn't even know I did it, but he was irate. And I can't really put too much blame on him without pointing the finger at myself, because sometime later, on a Christmas Eve, mind you, I had to go pick my wife up from her office. She worked in one of the downtown towers, and it had a pull-through area underneath where you could pull in, pick people up, drive out the other side. And for whatever reason, I must have gotten there. She wasn't there yet, so I had to pull out and loop back around and come through again. And for whatever reason, had it in my head that the street I was pulling off into was a one-way street going to my left, to the east. So I pulled on far two lanes were full of traffic. The first two lanes were empty, so I thought, well, hey, I could pull out and loop back around. Well, as soon as I pulled out, I realized it's not a one-way, it's a two-way, and now I'm blocking one of the westbound lanes facing the wrong direction. So I pulled up, kind of edging over, hoping somebody would let me in. I'm scanning the faces in my mirror, trying to find someone who will be kind enough to let me in. Instead, I found a guy who caught my eye in the mirror, wagged his finger at me, and shook his head no, wagging his finger. Well, he wasn't just not letting me in, he was being belligerent about it. And all of a sudden, my anger just came from nowhere and overwhelmed me. When the light changed, that guy went by. The guy behind him let me in, and I pulled in behind him. And I got right on that guy's tail. And I followed him for 2 or 3 blocks, glaring at him because of what he had done, because he'd been so rude to me. I wanted to make sure he knew exactly what he had done. And I don't know if he even noticed me. I don't know if it scared him. I don't know what would have happened if he'd stopped the car and jumped out. What if he'd had a gun? I don't know. But what happened there is my anger consumed me. And just like that guy who ran up to my window, I was irate at that man. I've had other things. You know, I was riding in a car with a guy one time, and he was in the left lane, and the car in front of him was driving slow. And so he got angry and he ran right up on the back end of the guy's car. Didn't hit him, but he went right on his bumper tailgating. And then as soon as it was clear on the right, he jerked out, revved up, went in front of the guy and slammed on the brakes. I'm riding in the passenger seat the whole time. Freaked me out, kind of scared me. Those kinds of things. Had other things. You know, what happens when you're at a soccer game and somebody knocks your kid to the ground? You know, my daughter, one of my daughters got called out on 2 strikes in a softball game one time because the umpire neglected to set his clicker back. And I was irate. We get mad about those things. I used to coach travel basketball, and I had some parents that really just ripped into me because of this or because of that. They didn't like how I did this or how I did that. People just get angry for all sorts of things. What is it that causes your anger to rage? What causes anger to show up in your life? I must admit, it shows up in mine sometimes. Now I'm going to tell you about the cart kid. I was taking my mother-in-law to the store. It was a Walmart. My wife and I had the habit of every Saturday we would pick up my mother-in-law. We would take her to the store to get whatever few supplies that she needed for that week. For whatever reason, this particular week, we sent my wife inside while my mother-in-law and I sat outside, and we were waiting for her to come out. And we were just chit-chatting. We were having a nice time. She's in her 90s. We were just, you know, having an enjoyable visit. And for whatever reason, I was trying to whistle. I think I was trying to do the Andy Griffith tune. But I was trying to do that, but I wasn't sure I was actually doing the Andy Griffith tune or if I was doing the Gomer Pyle tune. And so I was asking her, and we were kind of joking back and forth. And I said, "Can you whistle?" And to my astonishment, she puckered up and whistled right there in the car. And we got a kick out of it. We were kind of laughing and chuckling, and all of a sudden we were jerked out of our nice moment. And I didn't know what it was, but I looked up to see a 30-foot line of shopping carts had rammed into the front of my car. And at the end of that 30-foot line was a guy. Well, actually, he was at the front of the line. So he was guiding it in the front, and there was a machine driving it from the back. And he had run right into the front corner, driver's side front end of my car, and which, you know, one bump is like, oh, wow, man. But then he he kind of backed up, and then he started again and hit it again. Well, I raised my hands, and the first time, and he said, "Sorry." Okay. Well, he backed up, he went it again, and he hit it a second time. And I'm like, "What's the deal?" And he's like, "Sorry." And then he backed it up and he started going again. This time the actual cart machine rammed itself right into the bumper of my car. And he's like, "Sorry." And this time by that time I'm irate. And I jump out of the car, leaving my mother-in-law in a very anxious state. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Sorry." And he just kept going with his line of carts, looping them around. He's just walking, he's just going on. Didn't stop, didn't come back to look to see what he might have done to my car. And so it was a pretty upsetting thing. And it was a pretty upsetting thing. And if you look there in the picture on the left, he did bungle up my bumper. That's actually the damage from the cart machine that smashed into the bumper of my car. And I'm like, "Hey, you damaged my car." "Sorry." "Where are you going?" "Sorry." And he just kept going. Just to me, he was leaving the scene of an accident where he damaged my car. He was being callous. He didn't care. Despite what his words said, his actions told me he didn't care. He didn't think it was a big deal. So he just kept going. And I couldn't take it. My anger just overwhelmed me. So my wife comes back and she says, right about that time, and I said, "That guy just banged up our car." And she's like, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" I said, "Well, I guess I'm going to go find a manager." And so I charged off towards the Walmart to find this kid's manager. And as I got closer, I see the kid over to the right where they lined the carts up to the side of the store. And so I angled over toward him. I was going to confront him, and then I was going to find his manager. And as I got closer, I overheard him say, "I felt really bad." Well, that maybe took one little corner off the edge of my anger, but I was still irate. And I come around the corner and I see two other Walmart employees there talking to this kid. And he goes, "That's the guy." And they're like, "Sir, sir, sir." I said, "Look, he damaged my car. He ran the carts right into the front of my car and he damaged it." And they're like, "Well, I said, "I need to see a manager." And they said, "Well, we're going to go see a manager. We're going to go get the manager for you right now." It was just his first time driving that many carts, and it was an accident. And we talked for a while. And I was angry, and he's like, "I really am sorry." But the thing that I discovered pretty quick into the conversation is that he wasn't just some callous kid. He was special needs. And he was just trying to do his job. And he had a bad thing happen, and he really was sorry. He really didn't mean to do it. And I said, "You're really sorry?" He goes, "Yes, sir, I'm very sorry." And he stuck his hand out. And so I took his hand and I shook his hand. And I said, "Well, I think maybe we'll just let this go then." He's like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "But maybe next time not so many carts." And he smiled and I smiled, and the two people that he was talking to felt like they had just avoided a hurricane. And so they were smiling and everybody was happy. And I went away. I went back to my car. And I jumped in my car, and my mother-in-law says, "What's going to happen?" She's still anxious about it. And I said, "Nothing. I forgave him." I said, "And besides, it's a whole lot more fun to forgive than it is to be angry." And I still believe that. Because you see, my compassion overwhelmed my sense of anger. It's a whole lot more fun to forgive than to be angry. All right, time for our discussion questions. Question number 1. Share about a time when you were very angry. Describe how it made you feel. The second one is, have you ever had someone misinterpret your words or intentions and respond in anger? How did you feel? You know, I think about that time I was I pulled out in the wrong lanes and I was trying to get in. The guy wagged his finger at me. He misinterpreted my intention. He thought I was just trying to shortcut the system. He thought I was just trying to cut in line. He didn't really realize that I had made an error and that I was in oncoming traffic by mistake and that I was looking for help. But his misinterpreting of my actions made me angry. Okay, number 3, have you ever experienced a time when you allowed compassion to overrule your anger? The next one is, what are some ways that anger can lead to hurtful consequences? We see that every day, right? We see it every single day. People get angry, they lose control of themselves, and something terrible happens. What are some examples, or what are some ways that anger can make that happen? And then lastly, how can compassion change the situation and bring about positive consequences? You know, in the previous class, I said that grudges and compassion cannot coexist. I will also say today that anger and compassion cannot coexist. If you can find it within yourself to have compassion towards the person, you cannot stay angry. Give it a try. Try it. If you can apply compassion, you cannot stay angry. All right, time for our weekly challenge. This week's weekly challenge is, over the next week, anytime you feel anger surging to the surface of your heart, challenge yourself to find a way to approach the situation with compassion and see if that doesn't make a difference. All right, next week's class is titled Earnest, Hand-Me-Downs to the Rescue. I hope you'll join me next week for that class. Thanks.